Marine reacts to the Tyranids. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. By the Templin Institute. As always, I'm going to be leaving a link to the original video and channel down in the description below, so go ahead and make sure that you check them out. Now, I know this intro is a little different from what we usually do, but I figured that this way I'm going to try to keep them a lot shorter, that way you can get right into the video. And I'm not trying to bog it down with any announcements or channel updates. I figured that I'm going to just post down the community post. So I'm excited to learn a little more about the Tyranids and kind of see what they're all about. But before we do, don't forget to like, subscribe, really does help me out a lot. Hit that notification bell right there. That way you get notified every time I do upload. Sometimes uploading twice a day, typically working on them in the mornings and releasing them in the late afternoon to late evening. That way when you all get off work, you enjoy the videos at your leisure. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and see what the Tyranids are all about.
The existence of the Imperium of Man is dependent upon the Astronomicon. It is an immense psychic beacon powered by the life force of 10,000 psychers, calibrated and projected across the galaxy by the Emperor himself. Without it, navigating the Immaterium would be impossible, and no human starship would ever reach its intended destination. So critical to the survival of mankind is the Astronomicon that very few have stopped to consider the consequences of shining such a powerful light into the darkness of the universe. Indeed, evidence has slowly begun to mount that the Astronomicon might have drawn the attention of something lurking in the empty void between galaxies. An unknowable consciousness of unprecedented scale, relentless in its advance, and leaving only drained, dead worlds in its wake. To the Imperium, this abomination is named for the first world it devoured, the Tyranids.
I think I got it right. Or at least the intended pitch of the actual voice, or the actual race. I have been hearing about the Astronomicon coming out a lot frequently in the past couple of videos. So I feel like that's another one I'm going to try to see if I can find a video on it that's a little more in depth.
The true nature of the Tyranids defies any conventional classification. It is not a single species or even genus, but instead most closely resembles an entire spacefaring ecosystem composed of innumerable bioforms. These can vary tremendously in their size, appearance, and function, but remain only variations on the same genetic theme. Together, they form a distinct collective superorganism, capable of traveling across the universe in living armadas known as Hive fleets. These Hive fleets systematically consume all biomatter in their path, as a means to facilitate their own rapid evolution and reproduction. The diversity of Tyranid life present within these Hive fleets cannot be overstated. At their core are impossibly massive bioships, living creatures that function simultaneously as starships rivaling even the mightiest battleships, and biological factories which endlessly replicate millions of Tyranid organisms. Hive ships are escorted by countless other Tyranid organisms far too varied to be systematically categorized. Together, these fleets are so vast that they are often mistaken for nebula when viewed at a distance, and can blot out entire stars upon their closer approach. Every Hive fleet encountered so far is driven by the same collective hive mind, but each exists as a separate force. Their composite life forms can differ significantly in their appearance or exhibit different and unique strategies for overcoming local resistance. In several instances, different Hive fleets have been observed competing with one another for resources, lending credence to the idea that each fleet exists as its own separate entity. The truth of...
Okay, so they talked about it being not a specific genus, not a specific race, and that it's just kind of like an ecosystem, or like just an amalgamation, I think that's the word, as far as like they're all together. And then that's also what's in the, that's what they call a hive, as far as like their ship, I guess, to put it simply. And it seems like they're actually a competition with each other as well. So there's, I mean, more likely than not, there's probably a lot of infighting. That's kind of what I'm getting. I mean, I feel like I'm confusing myself with this. I don't know. We'll keep going.
Of the relationship between Tyranid hive fleets is likely far more complex, perhaps more akin to single cells within a living body, rather than rival factions. Within the bioships of each Hive fleet are swarms of biomechanical creatures, produced by the directive of the hive mind to adapt to whatever its current circumstances. Tyranid matter is constantly reabsorbed into biomass reclamation pools to create new species, or adapt existing ones to better suit the hive mind's immediate purpose. This is made possible by their extraordinary rapid rate of evolution, the key to each hive fleet's adaptability. The same basic forms of life, however, can be found in every hive fleet. Small, maggot-like creatures known informally as rippers are perhaps the most common species. They are almost always present in great swarms, capable of overpowering and consuming creatures many times their own size. In certain instances, rippers have been known to bury deep underground and metamorphosize into more advanced bioforms. In all likelihood, rippers are an immature form of Tyranid life, and theoretically capable of gestalting into any other type of bioform when given the proper signals from the hive mind. What might be considered the standard infantry of Tyranid hive fleets are known as gaunts and divided into a multitude of subspecies. Typically, they possess large scythe-like claws or a type of ranged bioweapon, which fires a grotesque form of living ammunition. Some variants even possess wings, while others are designed to hunt in total darkness or any other type of environment. Larger Tyranid life forms likewise exist to fulfill every conceivable need. The Tyrannicus gladius, more commonly known as simply the Tyranid warrior, serves as a far more capable type of shock trooper. Like its smaller brethren, it is highly adaptable to any battlefield condition. Well over 200 variants have been observed so far.
Alright, 200 variants. So, I don't know if... Damn. I'm trying to not only picture, but like really try to grasp what she's saying. And as far as, obviously, keep bringing up adaptability and that how quickly it can do it, or evolution or adaptability, are somewhat similar. Now, is that in reference to actually physically changing its body, or is it more talking about like it can adapt as in it starts to think a lot better, say like tactics, right? I mean, it could be a combination of both. It seems like it would probably be at the very least physical, because they did say like those little ones, rippers, that they'll burrow into the ground and they're actually, I don't know, I guess you could call it adaptability or evolution, and then they'll obviously change to a different type of Tyranid. And you can kind of see why these guys would definitely be a big threat to essentially any race, because they could be able to adapt to them.
And it is possibly the most versatile of any Tyranid species yet encountered. The Tyranid equivalent of a main battle tank is the Carnifex, a living battering ram impervious to all but the most powerful weaponry. While not as adaptable when compared to smaller bioforms, the Carnifex has nevertheless been encountered as several different subspecies suited to either ranged or melee combat. The largest Tyranid creatures deployed planetside are known as Biotitans. These are colossal war engines, which tower over the battlefield and have been known to overcome even the Titan legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus in direct combat. Perhaps the most dangerous forms of Tyranid life are those specifically created from the gene stock of species living within the Milky Way. Genetic materials harvested from the Orkoid race has purportedly been used to create a type of living artillery, while zoanthropes, perhaps the strangest and most bizarre of Tyranid species, likely share at least some DNA with the enigmatic Eldar. Only under
With the Eldar? Those are supposed to be like those elves, or like the elf interpretation in this universe. So it also does really seem, and I've been seeing it quite a bit, that every single race also has their own form of, I guess, subclasses. They got their, I guess you would call it, in the Imperial Guards instance, for example, you would call it their tanks, or with the Space Marines, their Titans. And obviously, right here, you said that these guys have Titans also. They got other ones that I don't remember the one that they said that doesn't really have necessarily good adaptability, but it's insanely strong, and that's more of its tank. And now They're saying that there's one that's more, even has like an artillery. I believe it was the picture right before this one. Obviously, you would see like with the Krieg video, the Imperial Guard, you can see that they have artillery or arty as well. So I feel like in a way, even though I keep thinking like one race has an advantage, every single race has an advantage. So it kind of, in a way, helps things to balance out. So far from what I'm seeing.
Threat of execution will servants of the Imperium speak of the suspected origins of the Tyrant Guard. These bioforms possess a tremendous resistance to injury of a kind only before seen in the warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. If this is accurate, it would mean that the Tyranid hive mind has incorporated the DNA of fallen Space Marine chapters and possess at least a portion of the genetic material of the Emperor of
Attention, Imperial citizen. The transmission of unknown origin you have accessed has been deemed heretical by the order of His Most Holy Inquisition. You will remain at your terminal until such time the nature of your guilt has been determined. Any attempt to resist Imperial authorities or again access restricted information will result in the harshest method of execution. May Imperial justice account in all balance. The Emperor...
Okay, I actually thought it was going to end right there because I was thinking like there's still like half the video. I don't know if she said it was for a fact, but there is some strong evidence, or almost the evidence was kind of right there. But it seems like it was more based on an assumption that they're taking the, I forgot what she said as far as what they're taking, but I guess the genes or like some of the DNA, I think she said DNA, from these Space Marines that do die, and they're essentially, I mean, it always has like a little piece of the Emperor, right? And you never know. I'm curious to see if with the gene, like blue genes, gene seed, people have been mentioning it, but I'm curious to see if a Tyranid has ever taken one. Or, I mean, unless that's what she was referred to. Take one, see if it's compatible. Or maybe it only works with humans. I haven't really heard. All I've ever heard is that it has to be somewhat compatible with you. So it's kind of a 50-50. And then on that case, also wondering if that would work on other races as well. Because then they do say that if they do fall, apothecaries, I believe, was the name of the ones who try to go retrieve it so that it doesn't fall into the enemy's hand. So assuming that maybe they don't even know if it can work on other races as well. And obviously they're not going to want to risk that.
Hive tyrants act in a capacity that might, in other species, be reserved for field commanders or warlords. While larger and stronger than most other variants, the true value of these creatures is their exceptional psychic abilities that allows in them a closer connection to the hive mind. Some believe hive tyrants act as a repository of the hive fleet's consciousness, meaning they collectively embody the hive mind itself. The relationship between the hive mind and individual Tyranid bioforms is only partially understood. All Tyranid creatures, from hordes of rippers to massive hive ships, possess a common psychic bond. This is known to the Imperium as the Synapse, and it enables the Tyranid swarms to think, perceive, and act to their full potential within the greater superorganism. Any level of coordination and control within a hive fleet is only possible through this synaptic web, for its constituent life forms are too numerous and varied as to be completely uncontrollable otherwise. Generally, smaller, weaker Tyranid organisms are mindless, instinctive creatures, performing their functions with no conscious oversight or commitment by the hive mind. Larger, more complex creatures, by contrast, are capable of advanced decision-making appropriate for their situation, and require a larger, if still minuscule, part of the hive mind's distributed sentient awareness. Within the tangled hierarchy of Tyranid fleets, swarms, and broods, exists a special type of synapse creature, whose slightly more advanced brain functions as a type of psychic hub. Without these Synapse creatures to relay and interpret the will of the hive mind, entire swarms can quickly falter, and more basic Tyranid bioforms might revert to animalistic behaviors. The overpowering nature of the hive mind's psychic presence is a phenomenon known to the Imperium as the shadow in the warp. Whether deliberately projected by hive fleets or simply the byproduct of the hive mind's synaptic control, it manifests in most species as an all-encompassing feeling of dread and hopelessness. For highly psychic individuals or races, this effect is magnified even further, often leading to suicide or insanity. The deadliest consequence of this anomaly, however, is the termination of any connection to the immaterium, making psychic communications or the manifestation of psychic abilities extremely difficult. For many worlds reliant on psychers for interstellar communication, the shadow in the warp effectively isolates them from the greater galaxy, preventing any means of escape or summoning reinforcements. Even demons of chaos manifested in the material realm by the dark gods wither in its presence, and entire warp rifts have been sealed in the presence of a Tyranid swarm. By the time the shadow in the warp is felt on a target world, it is almost certainly already too late for the planet's population. While this is usually the first sign of an imminent Tyranid invasion, it is probable that specific bioforms have already been present on the world for some time. The earliest stages of a Tyranid infection are subtle. A specialized vanguard, deployed in advance of the Hive fleet, will be active on a planet's surface for months or perhaps even years. The organisms deployed will have evolved abilities and behavior that focuses on concealment, and will almost never seek out any type of combat.
So, by the way, that last picture looked at the Catachan jungle area. So when they said that some of those Tyranids could be there in advance, right? And as they were saying that they're trying to be more covered, concealed, not really trying to draw too much attention. Is that, I guess, an attempt to like scout out the planet, get some information? They did say that it does adapt. It seems like it'd be a scout then, right?
Instead, they merely observe the native environment and relay their findings back to the Hive fleet. Any attacks are limited to isolated wildlife, utilizing their genetic code to ensure that the rest of the swarm will be able to function within the planet's unique biosphere. The most insidious component of Tyranid reconnaissance are gene stealers. These are among the most intelligent and independent creatures ever developed by the swarm, capable of operating far from the controlling influence of the hive mind. They clandestinely insert tiny embryonic Tyranid organisms into various hosts, which, over time, alter the victim's genetic code and suppress their consciousness. Often this is done over a period of generations, with many not even realizing they have been infected at all. Eventually, affected individuals will become a type of slave to a localized version of the hive mind, forming what have come to be known as gene stealer cults. These often manifest themselves as secret societies which worship the Tyranid race, even while incapable of understanding its true nature or their role within it. If a gene stealer cult has been successful, it will have thrown a targeted planet into chaos and weakened local resistance. The arrival of a Tyranid hive fleet within a star system marks the next stage of the invasion. With the immaterium disrupted by the shadow in the warp, local...
Real quick, I just want to point this out because it's just thrown me for a loop. So every single one of these, right, is a hive. Which means, they also said that they're alive. So, because it did say it was like a live ship. So all these things right here, hives. Correct me if I'm wrong. Also, I haven't heard if there's one exact, I guess, leader. Imperium of Man, you got the Emperor, the Orcs. There's one that's popping up into my head. I mean, obviously he wasn't the leader. There's some infighting for people trying to get power, but for them, from what I remember, is there's one that I can't remember him, but I know there's at least one Orc that's like supposed to be like really badass. I believe he was the one that said that he was nearly impossible, if not immortal, because his orcs around him believed him to be basically that. And then again with the power of will. And I haven't gotten too much into the other races yet, but it could be, for example, they all these hives just kind of work together, unless there's like maybe one like head honcho somewhere that they haven't mentioned yet.
Local starships can be safely destroyed without the possibility of reinforcement or escape. Once in orbit, Hive ships begin bombarding any inhabited planet with a rain of mycetic spores. These pods are filled with hostile microorganisms which immediately begin preparing the planet's atmosphere, oceans, soil, flora, and fauna for absorption. Complex organic molecules are broken down and recreated in forms better suited for the Tyranid species. Other spores deploy more complex creatures, which quickly gather into swarms and descend upon any organized resistance. Using information obtained during their initial reconnaissance, they target strategic locations and even local leadership. Once Tyranid forces have established a foothold on a planet's surface, enormous capillary towers are grown far behind the front lines. These towers concentrate the biomass that has already been absorbed, using it to either breed additional organisms needed to pacify the rest of the planet, or to extend its tendrils across entire continents. Simultaneously, capillary towers begin processing the atmosphere, absorbing all insect life and even airborne microbes. When a planet has been fully subjugated, the remainder of its biomass is relentlessly devoured. Capillary towers crisscross the entire world, from miles into the atmosphere to the deepest trenches of any oceans. Once the last of the planet's defenders have been destroyed, the victorious Tyranid swarms hurl themselves into digestive pools at the base of each capillary tower, their bodies broken down so that they might be recycled into new creatures for future conquests. Together with every molecule of organic matter or mineral wealth, they are transferred by massive pumping organs into awaiting Hive ships.
So when they go in that pool and they're essentially breaking down, she says that they get recycled to, I guess, be born again. And now, is this something that all of them, say if they conquered a planet, would have to do? Or is it something that just some of like the lower, I guess, cannon fodder, in a sense, would it be subjugated to? And then the ones who already, can't remember what they call them, but the Tyranids that are like a higher level, that are smarter, bigger, wouldn't it make sense to kind of keep them around? And I mean, unless, so I guess my question is, does every single one of them do that, except for obviously the Hive?
Once this has been completed, the Hive fleet moves on, leaving behind a planet stripped of all life. Tyran Primus was the first known Imperial world to be devoured in this manner, and it was only through the dedication of a single Inquisitor that the full extent of the Tyranid threat was revealed.
Honestly, when she was mentioning the Inquisitor, I thought she had said originally that he helped or get rid of that threat. But, I mean, obviously due to Exterminatus, which, I mean, I guess this is one of those scenarios, it's like, that would be damn near impossible. And then, obviously, you wouldn't want them to spread. And, which also brings me to, like, to the Hives. Are they doing this just to do it as far as draining a planet? Or is this how they feed? I mean, obviously, I would assume that this is how they feed, right? But I'm not sure if they're kind of just doing this just to get stronger for some reason. Like, maybe they're trying to take over everything. Whatever the case may be, I'm kind of just going off based on suspicion at this point.
Yet there remain many smaller Tyranid fleets and splinters which have yet to be fully eradicated. Hive Fleet Leviathan, the largest Hive fleet ever encountered, remains the greatest danger. Nearly half of the swarm was destroyed before it could threaten Holy Terra, while the remainder, in a desperate gamble, was purposefully lured into conflict with the enormous Orc empire of Octarius. Orc warbands and Tyranid swarms now clash there in an ever-escalating spiral of violence. Orcs from across the galaxy, even Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka himself, have arrived in the Octarius sector to battle Leviathan, growing bigger and stronger on their diet of conflict, but every Orc devoured gives more biomass to the growing Tyranid swarm. While the Imperium has been granted a reprieve, it is likely whoever emerges victorious will do so far stronger than before. How many more Hive fleets?
I've grown a somewhat liking to the orcs. And then she made a good point as far as the orcs getting stronger because they're fighty. But the more biomass that the Hive is collecting, the Leviathan, I believe she said. So this could just keep going and going until the point, I mean, if one of them does win, going to be on a whole new level of strength. Or, I mean, in this case, I would want the orcs to win. I don't know if it's me being biased about it, but definitely would not want the Tyranids to win. So this is kind of a lesser of two evils. But then again, not really, just because I mean, it seems the orcs just fight because that's what they like to do. And that's kind of what they're somewhat like born to do. Seem pure-hearted, at least in knowing and doing what you would expect them to do.
Might be headed for the light of the Astronomicon can only be guessed at. In all probability, the first Hive fleets to arrive are only the vanguard, sent to probe and test the galaxy before the main strength of the hive mind finally arrives. There is no facet of the Tyranids not encumbered by mystery. It is rumored that the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition have identified possible Tyranid incursions as early as the 35th millennium, and some claim to have found evidence of their kind that predates the Imperium itself. Yet the most distressing evidence of the Tyranid's nature is at once the most obvious, but also the most overlooked. To date, no two Hive fleets have entered the galaxy from the same direction. The Imperium, and all other life within the Milky Way, might be surrounded, and every other observable galaxy in the universe a lifeless husk. If this is the case, then perhaps, whatever the consequences, it might have been better that the Astronomicon, the light of the Emperor, was never lit.
Let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. That last section would have terrified me. When she said that there was some that have even been said to have become or been there since before the Imperium of Man, which means that as far as they know, as far as how far their universe galaxy actually stretches, that there could be an entire husk around it all, and it's all been conquered by the Tyranids. And I thought Warhammer in and of itself already was crazy, but now this is just adding a whole another layer. Obviously, I don't believe she said it was true. I believe she said that that's a high possibility. And if that is a possibility, I honestly wouldn't even know what to think. I mean, as far as thinking like what race could conquer the whole universe, unless there's in some way some of it being just perfectly balanced. So real quick, also just reiterating one thing as far as their adaptability. I wonder how fast they can do it. I'd be very curious to see if there is a little more information, or at least some solid fact information that is saying that maybe some of these Tyranids have actually, when they've killed a space marine, that they actually took some of its DNA and in some way was able to change itself in a way to somewhat similarly resemble a space marine. And then on top of that as well, this isn't really dealing with the Tyranids, somewhat, but not really. As far as the gene seed goes, I wonder if other races have actually been able to find some compatibility with it. I don't remember hearing anything about it saying be strictly to human, but I would assume that would be pretty standard if it was. But I mean, if not, that's most likely why they do have those apothecaries. I think that's the name of the guys who actually go out and try to grab it from a space marine when they die. Because, I mean, yes, it's valuable. They don't want it to get lost. But it also seems like it might just be because they don't want another race to get it for obvious reasons. So that's pretty much I got it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Really does help me out a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it. It helps me improve the channel. If you're curious to see what's coming up next, check the description down below. You're going to see a list of about 5. Top to bottom is going to be how I view them. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.